Laenor lives! Oh, I'm so happy. That was an amazing moment to see that happen, especially since they'd taken us to such a dark, low place. Oh my gosh, this is why we watch shows when they drop. This is what appointment television is all about. To see Laenor there, still alive and reaching for that brass ring and a new life. It's just incredible. It put such a big smile on my face. It was one of the right away. It was one of the best moments I've ever had watching a show. It was incredible, and I hope that nobody spoiled it for you. Now, why is this such a big deal besides what you saw in the show? Well, let's discuss. Well, first off, it is a major change from the books on a show that doesn't deviate that much from the books. And when it does, it usually doesn't work out. This, though, was a brilliant change. Now, in the books, Carl with a Q does kill Laenor for reals, and it's heavily implied that he was a mercenary for Damon, turning on his own lover so that Renera would be free to marry Damon. Pretty bleak stuff. And it seemed that that would be the case on the show as well, because they even set up earlier on at the funeral that Carl was maybe just using Laenor and didn't really care about him because, you know, he abandoned him and was socializing at the funeral while Laenor was having a really rough time. I felt so bad for Laenor. I would like to think that maybe Carl really does love Laenor and he was just kind of a jerk at the funeral. Maybe they were just having an off day as a couple. But bottom line, what Carl does for Laenor helps do for Laenor this episode is so life-changing that it's all good, even if their romance doesn't work out. I'm not saying he might not have to pay Carl off a little bit later, but still, I think Carl's a good guy. Then, outside of the show, there have already been headlines accumulating about House of the Dragon following that old dated trope of bury your gays after what happened to Joffrey. And I think those were fair criticisms of the show. And I heard many of you, particularly those of you in the LGBT community, being greatly disappointed and shocked by Joffrey's murder, but also feeling that maybe this show wasn't for you or didn't value your viewership. And I certainly thought of you when they pulled Laenor's burning corpse from the fireplace, an image so horrific. It was as if Damon and Rhaenyra Targaryen had signed their work with fire. That I was like, I don't know if the show can recover from this. This is so horrible and offensive. Because it was yet another gruesome death that seemed to be fantasizing hateful real-world situations. Now, of course, fantasy and, you know, just because it's fantasy doesn't mean it can't reflect society, but it seems to only be reflecting a certain part of society, which is why the show is getting called out when you think of who's actually died on the show so far, who's, you know, been killed or died in a horrific manner. But so to see Laenor alive, his head clean shaven to hide his true identity, setting sail for a world where he could be his true self, after this world had taken everything from him, it turned a hateful, resigned scenario into a joyous and hopeful one. It was incredible. Oh, it was amazing. It gave you faith in humanity. I loved it. That's how good it was. That's how good the twist was. Because Laenor was so defeated earlier in his talk with Rhaenyra, because, you know, I had known his fate in the books, and I was like, Laenor, you deserve better. I'm so glad he got better. But he was, you know, he was even still trying to do the right thing, even as he was drowning in his own despair. And in just 2 episodes, it's a real credit to John McMillan that he made such a strong impression. We really connected to him. I mean, I was like, Laenor, you're awesome. And you could see that even Rhaenyra thinks he's awesome, a true friend. It was even revealed this episode that they did try to have a child together, but it just didn't work out. Laenor, things were not going well for Laenor. So, did Carl and Laenor trick Damon and Rhaenyra? At first, I thought they did, but no! I believe this was the plan from the very beginning, because that's why Damon kills that other man at Driftmark who has a similar build to Laenor and instructs Q that there must be witnesses. Witnesses to the beginning of the fight, but not there to see Carl and Laenor make the switch of putting that other body in the flames to fake Laenor's death. And I'm glad this is the case, because to be frank, Damon and Rhaenyra need to be fan favorites for this show to work, and right now they are, but I don't know if they could continue to be that if they ordered Laenor's death so heartlessly as they seem to do during the episode. They're like, we should be married, but too bad Laenor's still here, and you're like, you could even see that look on Rhaenyra's face when she was talking to Laenor. She's like, I just can't do it. He's too swell a guy. I truly hope that Laenor doesn't just set sail into the sunset. I hope he goes across the sea to the lands where you aren't judged by your name, similar to the way people actually left for America from Europe to escape the classism there and the judgment there. You know, I can't vouch for what America has become, but back in the day, that was the way one of the reasons that a lot of people came to America. And I hope that Lenor goes abroad, becomes not just more powerful, but more confident because he can truly be himself. And I hope he returns to Westeros like a boss, because this show, either later in this season or season 2, because this show really needs a strong LGBT player in the Game of Thrones. That is something they desperately need, particularly after what they did with Joffrey. I think, obviously it's good they moved on from bury your gays, but you don't want to have new ship off your gays either. You want your gays to return better than ever. But wow, even if he never returns, what a character arc, what a fantastic change from the books. And again, one of the most amazing moments I've ever seen in television. It just made my heart soar. And kudos to the whole team, the writers, the writing, the directing, John McMillan, and just the look on his face. And he was still scared. Because it was a big deal, but he was going for it. And it was the bravest thing Laenor's ever done, and I absolutely loved it. All right, so what's the next coolest thing that happened this episode? Oh, it was at a funeral that played more like a high school dance. Well, some of you will say it was Aemond claiming Vhagar, and some of you will say it's Damon Renera finally hooking up. I'd say it's close. That's a very close race for second place, and I'd love to hear what sequences were your favorite this episode and how you would rank them. But I would say the next coolest thing has to be the Vhagar sequence, and so we'll do that first, and then we'll go to Damon and Rhaenyra. All right, so last week, I compared riding Vhagar to riding an Airbus over a fighter jet. But this week, with the camera pulling back and getting to see Vhagar in all her majesty, amazing. Oh, it was incredible. This whole sequence, though, was a bit odd as they shot day for night. That's why it looked so weird. So I guess Miguel Sapochnik, director and executive producer, is aware that many of you feel his previous episodes have been too dark and too difficult to see. But I'm not a fan of shooting day for night because it's clearly not nighttime. It's a small quibble, though, because I was glad I was able to see what was happening, because what was happening was incredible. I guess we can chalk it up just to a very bright moon that night. Whew! That's like when they light a candle in a movie, and you're like, that is a very strong candle. I love the saddle that Laena put on Vhagar, like the rope ladder on a ship, to climb up and mount her. That was incredible. What a great idea. It was so Laena. And then, when Vhagar took flight, to see her stretched out like that across the sky, absolutely incredible. It was just awe-inducing. I also loved how the scene showed how dangerous it is to ride a dragon, right? It was like the real How to Train Your Dragon. Aemond is lucky he didn't die. I couldn't believe he held on to that thing. How is there not a way to strap yourself in? You'd think there would be. What about when we do barrel rolls? So also, I thought he might pull a Fabio when they flew through that pack of birds. I knew he lost his eye. I know what happens in the books, and sometimes I look it up afterwards to do my notes for the show because I want to have that element of surprise as well, of experiencing it through the show first. So I'm kind of like in the middle ground. So I knew he would lose his eye eventually, and when the birds came by and whipped by so fast, like voop, 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 I thought maybe, again, he'd pull a Fabio. But he didn't. But it was really cool to just really highlight the speed and the power. I mean, Vhagar, what a magnificent beast. Apologies for calling you an Airbus, my friend. Eamon should be proud of claiming Vhagar. Way to aim high, kid. That ain't no pig. I loved it. He shut everybody up. But then only if he had shut up after that, because he really made a mess of things afterwards. To be clear, I'm on Aemon's side reclaiming Vhagar. If Laena and Damon's daughter wanted Vhagar for herself, she should have been faster to claim her. I mean, it's fair. And also, let's not forget that it takes two to tango. Vhagar did allow Aemon to claim her, the dragon. So, Rhaena might want to go out and talk to Vhagar too and be like, what the heck? So dragons aren't really your friends. All right, side note, my bad, only Targaryens can control dragons, although Targaryens and Velaryons both have white hair, like the people of Valyria. So Corlys's children and grandchildren can control dragons because his wife, Rhaenyra, is a Targaryen, and Rhaenyra is Targaryen. So even though those aren't Corlys's actual grandchildren, her blood takes care of dragon riding for that group of kids. So you got to have Targaryen blood in there somewhere. But if you want to have the white hair, you can be Targaryen or Velaryon. Velaryons have the ships, they have the sea. Targaryens have the sky. They're the Air Force. All right. So anyway, Aemond, of course, also goes too far, calling Rhaenyra's sons bastards, who are there to defend Baela and Rhaena. They are indeed their father's sons, right? Very Harwin-strong activity. Aemond was even going to bash in Jacaerys' head, you know, the heir to the throne, a page right out of Daemon's playbook, by the way. So Lucerys, his younger brother, was right to defend him. I think he was in the right. And I'd like to add that for all their self-righteousness, it is totally Alicent and Sir Criston Cole's fault that Aegon and Aemond are little hateful dicks. They did that. I loved when Daemon blocked Criston Cole from interfering later on. I was like, love it. We'll get to that trial in a moment. But first, let's talk the next great moment, Damon and Renera. It's pretty crazy that all this romantic stuff took place at his second wife's funeral. I mean, wow, that's a lot, Damon. Damon is so concerned about being available for Renera, in fact, you know, wanting her to be able to approach him at the funeral, that he leaves his 2 daughters alone to grieve. He's like, just sit there, kids. I'm gonna go find you a new mommy. Or more importantly, on path to the throne, baby. It was interesting also to see Jacaerys upset that he's not able to mourn the parent that he lost. I was like, Ixnay on the talking about being an Astard Bay. You know, why don't you just stand up on that buffet table and tell everyone? Although, of course, everybody knows. But that underscores the type of couple that Daemon and Rhaenyra want to be, and that is perhaps why she wants to be with him. Because as she says later on, I can't take on the Greens without you. And that's it. They say it. Because in the books, it's the Greens versus the Blacks. Alicent is the Greens, Rhaenyra is the Blacks. So that's the big matchup we've been marching towards. And finally, someone said it. Used the terminology. Both born of fire, Daemon and Rhaenyra, it's becoming very clear that they will burn down everything and everyone that stands in their way. Their children kind of included, just props at their wedding. It was crazy to see those 4 kids shell-shocked standing there, reeling from everything that's happened, from the fight with Aemond to Vhagar being stolen, to reeling from the loss of their mother and their father. Which, by the way, Rhaenyra romanticized by saying, oh, they both died of fire. It was meant to be. And you're like, I guess so. Whatever makes you be able to go on, I guess. But I felt bad for those 4 children. They were like, did we just get sucked into a commune? I'm like, it's going to get crazy from here, boy. Now, of course, the real Daenerys, that's their couple name. The real Daemon and Rhaenyra moment is on the beach. The same beach, by the way, where Rhaenyra and Laenor made their own pact a decade ago. Let's hope these plans turn out better. Now, online, I saw someone make a joke that said Matt Smith looked like an Avatar character doing whiteface, and now I can't unsee it. So you're welcome. Now I gave you the same gift. But still, I have to say their kiss was pretty darn sexy. The way Matt Smith said Rhaenyra, I was like, wow, chills. And that they still burn for each other after a decade, and that Rhaenyra is still angry that he didn't take her away back then. That's indeed what she was asking him to do at her very wedding. Far sexier was the kiss than when they actually had sex. Where did Daemon, by the way, get all those Batman scars? I was like, how have you been burned so much? But I mean, also, you know, some people have said aren't Targaryens immune to being burned? I think Daenerys had like a magical situation going on as well. But anyway, I think this show, House of the Dragon, took the nudity complaints about Game of Thrones a little bit too much to heart, and now has gone too far in the other direction. Still, on the day of his wife's funeral, and everyone really liked Laena. It's not like people didn't like Laena. Laena was awesome. We loved Laena. And I was really moved by her funeral. Again, even though we spent so little time with her. I mean, really a fantastic performance. All right, now let's talk about this trial where swords are literally unsheathed as everyone stops pretending. I think Corlys says it best when Rhaenys reveals that she got over not being named queen decades ago and she would rather have her children. Now she's saying something. Geez, I think she's just being a jerk and being pretty unfair to Corlys because she was keen to marry them off at the time as well. But Corlys says, look, history does not remember blood. It remembers names. And I'm glad he clarified because it was super awkward and weird to see him talk of leaving his throne and house to a little boy who clearly is not at all related to him. A very sweet little boy, though. When Lucerys said he didn't want his inheritance because it meant that his parents and grandparents would all be dead, that was a very moving and relatable sentiment. I felt very bad for him. He's the second born, so it's rough for him for that as well. But that's kind of what this whole conflict is about. Are you a stickler for the details? Whose kid is that exactly? Or are you cool with broad strokes, as long as a Targaryen sits on the Iron Throne? And also, speaking of the Iron Throne, would you be cool if a woman was sitting on it? Now, sure, we really have an Alicent versus Rhaenyra fight here, but Alicent wants to put her son on the throne, not herself. But anyway, Olivia Cook's hair looked amazing this episode. Wow, so ethereal. I was like, looks so fresh. I love it. Too bad she's so hateful. She claims she wants a literal eye for an eye, but in reality, she just wants Rhaenyra to pay a price, any price, for all the rules she continues to break. But I mean, as I said, she made her kids such jerks. So come on. And there are paths forward that would work for everyone. I mean, Alicent's just going to burn everything down to the ground. Speaking of burning stuff down. Now, Rhaenyra counters that, ooh, Alicent, now everyone sees you for who you truly are. But Rhaenyra shouldn't necessarily think or assume that that's a bad thing, because as Otto points out, finally, they have someone in Alicent, a person in a position of power, the queen, who is willing to stand up to Viserys and Rhaenyra and has the position again to do so. And there are many in the court who would like to see Viserys and Rhaenyra removed from power for many of their own reasons. So Alicent, on that note, should make no mistake. These people's allegiance isn't to her, it's to an end goal that they all want. So I'm not saying that Alicent shouldn't use them, and I'm glad that she's smartening up to that when she, tells Larys, like, no, you don't have to kill any kids, but stand ready. She shouldn't make any assumptions about loyalty. I don't think they're loyal to her at all, or to her son. That's the thing. It's weird. The Alicent side has no loyalty, but the Rhaenyra side has like too much loyalty. It's crazy. That's another way that they're different. Aemond, though, is far better at playing the game than his mother, I'd say he's almost better than his mother, but he's certainly better than his brother. As he tells his mother to stand down, that he would gladly give his eye for Veigar, a sentiment that his grandfather backs up, saying, it's worth 1,000 eyes for Veigar, because Veigar is the biggest dragon alive, the second biggest dragon of all time, and she now fights for their side. So with the tensions dialed back down, that was a rough ride back, though, with Alicent and Viserys. She was like, I'll fluff your pillow for you now. And he's like, it's too late. But anyway, the Game of Thrones can continue, and continue it will. Other thoughts for this episode. I have grown really attached to Viserys, and I'm going to be so sad when he does die. He's so great. Although Damon really called him out on it this week. He said the gods have been particularly unkind to you, brother. And I can't believe, by the way, also that Damon laughed at his own wife's funeral. He's a difficult guy to defend. He's like a true bad boy, right? When Laena's uncle, so he laughs, he giggles. At first I wasn't sure why he giggled, and I suspect it was because Laena's uncle was making all these boisterous comments about how the blood of Velaryons runs thick, salty like the ocean, and was kind of looking at Laenor's children, and Damon laughed because they don't have any Velaryon blood. And yes, also that is David Tennant's adopted son playing Aegon, that many of you pointed out last week, whom we've also seen, by the way, in Doom Patrol. He had a brief role in Doom Patrol and almost had his own series spun off of that. Speaking of bloodlines, while he's not Tennant's son by birth, he has a lot of his quirks. I think he's got a lot of the David Tennant charm, and he does house Tennant proud. He doesn't have a lot of scenes, though, which is weird considering how important his character is. I can't believe that Viserys would agree to bring Otto back as the Hand. I mean, I guess it had to happen for the sake of the show, but every time he gets upset with Alicent, he should remember that he strengthened her position by bringing that guy back. I'd be like anyone. Ask anyone else to be the Hand, really, except for Larys Strong. So, and also, Kristen Cole is just so obvious about his support for Alicent. I mean, how is he allowed to continue to be with a weapon standing around anyone else? All right, so what did you think of House of the Dragon Episode 7? What were your favorite moments? In what order? Are you a green, a black, or just enjoying the show? I'll put myself in that camp. Plus, what do you think of such a significant change to the books? And do you hope that Lenor returns one day? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.